Hey folks, as you know, things have been a bit busy the last few months, so a lot of these videos are coming out a few months after they should have done. But with that in mind, this is going to be a short video because I didn't see that many movies in April of 2021. So enjoy the brevity, and let's get straight on with the show. Now, one thing that did happen while I was crazy busy is that I actually bought an iPad. Now, why am I telling you this? It's because one of the things that came with it was a free year of Apple TV Plus, or Apple Plus TV, or whatever the hell it's called. It's something I wouldn't have paid for, and this is not a sponsor or shell because honestly I can say I've watched almost nothing on it, because let's be honest, most of the stuff didn't look that interesting. I already have far too many streaming things and not enough time. That said, I did use it to watch a film called Greyhound. That's the Tom Hanks written movie about a World War II submarine hunter captain on a long mission across the Atlantic, getting a big flotilla of ships and supplies from America to Britain, while fighting off a Nazi wolf pack of submarines trying to sink them. And this is a total dad-style Sunday afternoon war movie. Like, almost the whole film, apart from the one wee opening scene with Elizabeth Shue in it, as a cameo as a captain's wife, is set basically on the ship, the Greyhound, as Hanks has to make a load of incredibly complicated decisions with the ever-changing variables and hundreds of lives in the balance at the time. And basically, this is kind of an on-top-of-the-water version of, like, a classic submarine movie. You know, the sort of things, the sort of Red October things where, you know, the captain says something and you see everybody else shouting it down the line, and then, you know, they randomly get out the way of, like, a torpedo or something else happens. I mean, you've seen these movies before. But this time it's about the ships on top of them, chasing the submarines, not the other way around. And it's really good fun. I mean, yeah, there's an awful lot of CGI ocean and ships, but it's good CGI and you can understand what's going on. And the film never really slows down or feels like it's talking down to the audience. It just carries you along with it, making it obvious what's going on in a well-crafted and sensible way. So yeah, 4 out of 5. I mean, it's a good, solid movie. The only crib being it feels a little threadbare a couple of points, and the passage of time is a little bit up and down. It's not always clear exactly how much time is passing, if it's an hour or a few minutes, and the bit of Elizabeth Shue at the beginning does feel like it's from a completely different movie that was sandwiched in at the studio's request to make sure there was at least one woman in this movie. But yeah, anyway, overall, big stamp of approval for me. Definitely one to just chill out on a Sunday afternoon and enjoy. Next up is a horror film called Vigil. Now, there aren't very many Jewish-themed horror movies, unless you count something like maybe The Keep from back in the 80s, or maybe The Possession, which was definitely a Jewish-themed one, because it was all about a Dybbuk box, which is like a Jewish demon prison thing in a wooden box. But anyway, The Vigil is about Yaakov, who works as a shomer, which is like a semi-religious job where somebody has to watch over the corpse of a recently deceased person in the community the night before the funeral. Only as it turns out, Yaakov ends up with the corpse when there's a demon in the house, and during the course of the night it causes him no end of scares and harm and worry and threatening his life. Now, this was kind of a fun film. I mean, it was decently made, it was very reminiscent of The Babadook in a lot of ways, and it was largely unclear for a lot of the film whether the demon was even real or if it was a figment or dream of this guy's clearly troubled mind, and maybe partly the spooky setting taking its toll on him. And yeah, it did have a few cheap jump scares, and overall, the script could have been a bit tighter, but generally, this wasn't a bad experience. I mean, it was a solid 3 out of 5, good scary evening in if you have a Netflix subscription and you fancy a bit of a spooky movie. Also on Netflix was a film that had an awful lot of Oscar buzz and even won the Best Actor Oscar last year for Gary Oldman, and that was Mank. Now, Mank is all about Herman J. Mankiewicz, a real-life screenwriter from back in the 1950s, who aside from being an alcoholic and a bit of a schlub, was also a fantastic raconteur with a razor-sharp wit. But after a car accident leaves him with a broken leg, he ends up holed up all summer set to work writing Citizen Kane for Orson Welles. Now, this film isn't the most original premise or concept. In fact, the film Trumbo arguably has a more convoluted and involved story of 1950s Hollywood scriptwriting, and that's well worth checking out, especially if you're interested in the suspected communist blacklisting that went on during the McCarthyist witch hunts. Mank, on the other hand, is David Fincher's love letter to cinema, to Citizen Kane, and also to his own dad who wrote the script. And apparently David Fincher has been planning to make this movie since way back in the late 90s, when he was still an up-and-coming movie director. And what makes it stand out is that it's all shot to look exactly like the film Citizen Kane, using the same techniques, and sometimes with Fincher doing his trademarked over 100 takes to get everything exactly perfect, which is a very Fincher thing to do. And they apparently used all the genuine original techniques to do the same thing. Kind of how, like, if you've ever seen Bram Stoker's Dracula, another Gary Oldman movie, they used old-fashioned special effects techniques to do all the little things in that. And this is a 5 out of 5 acting job all round with a great cast, a brilliant script, it's immaculately shot and edited, and it's also just a really enjoyable and interesting film. And there's not an awful lot more to say about it other than definitely check it out, but it's also a really interesting look into old Hollywood, and to be honest, there aren't enough films about that. But since this is a short week, I'll take a moment to just recommend, as previously mentioned, Trumbo, but also Hollywoodland, which is about the mysterious death of George Reeves, who used to play Superman back in the old black and white TV era. Also LA Confidential, which is a bit more about the police, but is also a solid film noir, and touches on a lot of Hollywood stuff with great performances from Guy Pearce, Russell Crowe and James Cromwell. And also the absolutely delightful pastiche of it all, Hail Caesar, which is the Coen brothers movie, poking fun-loving fun at all these same sort of aspects of Hollywood, including the communism side of things, in their most irreverent and silly way. And I suppose with everything else being pretty decent or at least okay in April, I was due a duffer. And that's where Outlaws and Angels comes in. This western tells the story of a gang of outlaws who blast their way out of a bank and then go on the run to Mexico down a difficult route, till eventually they arrive starved and thirsty at the house of a bunch of weirdo farmers, headed up by John Crichton himself from Farscape, but with a weird hairdo and tash. Also his ultra-conservative Bible-bashing wife and the two chalk-and-cheese daughters who are always arguing. Of course, the appearance of a load of ragged, nasty outlaws doesn't really make him too happy, and the leader takes a shine to his youngest daughter. She plays nice at first, right up until the point it turns out she actually hates her family and things start going down a very bloody and nasty turn. Meanwhile, Luke Wilson and Gomez from Breaking Bad are tracking them down looking for a showdown. Now, this is Grindhouse cinema. I mean, you know Grindhouse, that kind of cheap 70s looking cinema, full of violence and bad camera work and usually lurid subject matter. Well, I mean, this movie doesn't fail the audience in that regard, because, you know, there's bloody murder all over the place, sexual assault aplenty, a lot of implied and overtly stated incest, and it also doesn't help that the script is kind of rubbish and the actors clearly aren't getting the direction they need, and not least of all, Clint Eastwood's real-life daughter who plays Florence the Psycho. It also wouldn't actually be such a bad movie if it had ended at the pretty solid natural ending point, but instead the film drags on for another 20 minutes for no particularly good reason, even after the narrator has died on screen and done his final narration, which would suggest to me that either there was reshoots or somebody jumbled things about in the edit, or maybe just somebody was just an idiot. So yeah, 2 out of 5. I would skip it unless you really like Grindhouse or you just love watching all westerns. So that was April, and those were the films I saw. Now granted, it wasn't an awful lot, but I haven't had any kind of free time, so I'll get straight on to making the movies by month video for May. And yeah, so till then, everybody take care, and I'll catch you later on. Thanks for stopping by, and these have been my grumpy opinions. And a special thanks to all my patrons, and most especially my top tier patrons Judith Coloma, Laurie Laporte, and Michelle Forbes. Thanks guys, everyone keep it real, keep safe, and take care of yourselves. Bye bye.